Hi everybody, Kathy Tooley, CEO Tools for Success. So I want to address something to all my educator friends. If you're not an educator, you may or may not find value in this. So as a company, Tools for Success, we coach a lot of teachers and we work with teachers in helping them really understand their state guidelines. In other words, everything that needs to be taught in the grade level or discipline that you are in. I want you to think of it like a highway, right? This is the lane. This is where you should start. This is where you should end. This is the lane you need to stay in, right? And I want to have a little conversation about staying in your own lane. I work with a lot of teachers. Myself and a lot of my consultants work with teachers, and we hear all the time one of two things. Either we hear, my students are just too smart, Kathy. I understand that my state may have a recommended third grade reading level, but my students are just too smart. They are reading fourth and fifth grade books. Do you know what happens when they get to the fourth and fifth grade and the teacher goes to pull those books out and your child's already read it because you think you're something special? All you did was cripple that fourth and fifth grade teacher. So if your children are so smart, here's an idea. Increase the rigor. Increase the rigor, but stay in your lane. Or I hear this, Kathy, you don't know the kids I'm dealing with. My third grade students can't read like a kindergartner, and you want me to read third grade level books? That's exactly what I want you to read. And I want you to just provide the supports that they need to be able to read that third grade book. I want you to stay in your lane. I'm going to tell you my own personal story. I love the book, The Pearl. If you've never read it by John Steinbeck, it was one of my favorites. I taught it. Loved that book. Loved that book. And let me tell you, I made a bulletin board of an oyster and I sewed a pearl. No, I don't think you understand how beautiful my pearl was. I sewed my pearl. I lived for the time when it was time to teach the pearl. I knew it happened about every February. Most people put up cute Valentine's Day bulletin boards, but not me. I put up my pearl and my oyster, and I put the pearl, and I was ready. I was ready for it, and I taught it. I loved teaching it. The symbolism in the pearl, if you've not read it, I just loved it. It's like every character John Steinbeck ever created and everything that ever happened had a bigger picture. And I loved sharing it with my students and having them discover, what do you think was meant here, and what's the implication here, and what was he trying to imply. I loved teaching that book. And it used to be a freshman level book in my state. And then they moved it to a sophomore level, and I thought, well, that's just cute. But you don't understand. Did you not hear how cute my pearl was? My pearl was really cute. So I continued teaching it. And my department chair was in my classroom and asked to see me after, which was typical. And we talked about my lesson, which I knew was just really good because I loved that. Have I mentioned my pearl and how beautiful my pearl was? I don't think you understand. Like, it was beautiful. So she said to me, hey, Kathy, you probably don't realize that book has now shifted to a sophomore level. I'm going to be honest, I didn't. I'm just going to be vulnerable and be honest with you. I didn't. And she said, so I'm going to need you to not teach that. And I remember thinking, did you not see my bulletin board? We drew every time we talked about a character. We would do character development. I had posters made of the characters, and we put little Post-it tab notes on them every time we read something new. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's a new character development. That's a new character trait. And we would go put different color Post-its on different color posters for the characters. And I just thought, well, bless her heart. Like, she doesn't get it, right? So I just sat and nodded and thought, no. No. Next year, next February, bulletin board, pearl, posters, Post-its ready, right? Here we go. And I'm teaching the pearl. Unfortunately, that was also an evaluation time. So my principal was in with my department chair. Again, phenomenal lesson. Like the character traits my kids were coming up with, and then the symbolism they were relating to what the pearl really meant. Oh, if you've not read the book, you got to read it. Incredible. I get a glowing evaluation. I wasn't surprised by that. But then my department chair called me in her office. And she said, Kathy, I thought we talked about this last year. And I tried to play dumb, but that didn't work very well for me. Dumb is not something I can play well. And I said, but, insert department chair's name, whom I love. She was a great lady. Have you not seen my pearl? My pearl. I wish you could see it. Like, I almost just want to pause for a minute so you could have just known what my pearl was. And she said, I'll tell you what. Want to switch to sophomores next year? Then you could still teach the pearl. Or I'm going to need you to pass your stuff on. I mean it. Happy to switch you to sophomores. We're going to have an opening next year for sophomores. I didn't want to teach sophomores. I loved teaching freshmen. I know I'm weird. For those of you that are high school teachers, you're thinking you did. I did. That's a whole separate video for a whole separate day, but I love teaching freshmen, especially starting to get them to really sometimes love literature when they didn't. I loved it. And I remember thinking, and I said to her, I don't want to teach sophomores. And she said, then I'm going to need you to pass off the pearl to Miss So-and-so, who would love to do it. And I will never forget going back to my office in my classroom. And when I took the pearl bulletin board down, I was in my classroom all by myself, taking the pearl thing down, putting it in a box, removing the oyster, putting it in a box, grabbing all of my posters of my characters and putting them and rolling them up. And I had told the teacher that I was going to share it with her. And when I walked over to hand her the box, she kind of pulled. You ever done that for a second where you're like, And she loved it. She was a younger teacher, and she hugged me and said, oh my God, thank you. And I remember watching her walk down the hallway, almost skipping, thinking, there goes my pearl. Why am I making this video? Because all of you've got a pearl you won't let go of. You've taught it for 100 years. You love it, but it's not in alignment with your state curriculum anymore. And even though I taught a great lesson on the pearl, I taught a lot of other great lessons too. And I created a new pearl. It was Edgar Allan Poe, by the way. I loved Edgar Allan Poe. He's weird, really weird, but separately. I'm a good teacher, and I was going to create another pearl. So for those of you that just can't let that pearl go, I had to, because I wasn't doing right and staying in my lane. So I hope that that story helps you understand that I get it. I understand it. I know how difficult to let that pearl go is. But here's my invitation. When you're dealing with your state standards, stay in your lane. Okay? Have a great day. Don't forget to like and share and follow and ring the bell and come be a part of our stories. Lots of other great stories like this to come. Have a fantastic day, everybody.